Okay, we'll call the April 12th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with the pledge to the flag, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jess, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Perkovic.
Here.
Mr. Sidoti.
Here.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Mr. Varga.
Here.
Mr. Cicero.
Here.
Mr. Snow.
Here. Entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of the March 22nd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. We have no public hearings this evening. Under old business, item 1 will be tabled, or is tabled, will remain on the table tonight. So with that in mind, architectural review of a restaurant at 8351 Tyler Boulevard. Is that applicant here? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to remove it from the table, please.
Motion to remove.
Second.
Yes?
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Welcome back. You're ready to go, right? Okay.
So last time we spoke, we had seen the all-brick building, which was similar to the other Taco Bell here that we are building in Mentor. And since then, though, we have asked for you guys have asked for the tower in the back with the additional signage, which we know we need to go for the variance for still, to add the slat wall. Talk to the company there, talk to Brand, slat wall. We added that, not a problem. And I know one of the other things that was mentioned was to relocate this electrical, but based on the configuration of the building and where the building sits, the only other place to put it would be on this side, and that's not a possibility based on the layout here. That would be this corner, which is on the drive-through side, so there's not enough width there. But we have painted it to match the building. And there is also the possibility, if that's not sufficient to paint, then we could shift all these parking stalls up and put a grass area right here with additional planting that would be high enough to screen that as you're coming into the site.
Is that still good for sufficient parking?
Yes, because we would just shift all these up enough to add a small
Okay.
buffer there.
Anything else you'd like to share?
No, those are the only changes that we've
Okay.
made since the last time.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or the administration? Go right ahead.
One comment, this is a very small thing, I'm sure you can agree. There's a gray door on the side of the building. That's not a customer door, right? That's a service door?
No, that's just an exit only for employees.
Why don't you paint it out like you did the electrical equipment?
That's not a problem. That matches the old color building, the original style of this before we put on the red brick. So I'll make a note to
Yeah,
change
I
it.
mean, it's not a big thing, but you just paint it out, so it's not.
Okay.
you know.
I'd like to see that electrical box be shielded with the landscaping, so if you can shove that all a little bit to the north.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, entertain a motion.
Motion to approve with 2 additional requirements, one being the door, one being the landscaping at the electrical box.
I'll second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes?
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Thanks for working
you.
with us on that.
Thank you.
Item 3 and item 4, those are going to be dismissed, is that correct?
Yes.
I entertain a motion to take them off the table before we dismiss them.
Motion to remove items 3 and 4 off the table.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes?
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Entertain a motion to dismiss.
Motion to dismiss items 3 and 4 on tonight's agenda without prejudice.
Second.
Jess?
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Thank you. Under new business, item 5, minor subdivision of one lot to create 2 outlots at 9377 and 9383 Menor Avenue. Is that applicant here? Got the big guns again, huh? Can you identify yourself for the clerk, please?
Rick Ferris, Sequoia Realty, and Heisley Point.
Robin Libertor, Sequoia Realty.
Now, give us a quick overview of what you want to do at that location. I know it's a subdivision of property, but go ahead.
So currently, the plaza consists of one parcel, and we are looking to split the 8,000 square foot outlot building to create a new parcel for it. And the reason in doing that is to have an accurate and more proportionate allocation of value to each building. Our tenants have triple net leases, and they each pay their pro rata share of real estate taxes. With the planned improvements and new tenants coming to the outlot building, which is going to be redeveloped, that will create a significant increase in valuation, almost 50% approximately of the current value of the entire property. And so it would be unfair and disproportionate to have the tenants in the inline space pay such a higher amount for real estate taxes when it's really the outlot building that's going to have a much higher value. And also for the purpose of valuation in future financing of the building, of the two buildings.
How do we reconcile the pork chop?
We expanded the parcel with the outlot building on it to the east, so that the pork chop is now part of the outlot building parcel.
Okay, so that's not being divided.
Correct.
No.
Okay.
You want to
Good.
put that, 'cause that one's full. No, that one's correct. Yeah.
Up to speed.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti?
Ms. Liberatore, did you address the administration's concern that the proposed parcel line divides the landscape island?
Yes,
That's all
yes,
been
we
taken care of?
increased it so that it now
Oh, that's
encompasses
your-
that island.
Porch out.
Okay.
See it a little better here, I don't know. It's kind of hard to see because it's small.
Oh,
But you can see the shaded area, where are we? Here,
okay,
includes that whole driveway.
good. Ms. Liberatore, is the coffee shop as presented and as planned and presented earlier, is that still on the table?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. And one last question?
Go
Mr.
right
Chairman.
ahead.
Okay. There's 2 dumpsters on the remainder parcel, right on this, along Menor Avenue, right adjacent to Ruco's, and they're out in the open. Can those dumpsters be relocated to behind the building?
There's a grease dumpster there that
One is
belongs
grease, right.
to Ruco's, and I can definitely have them relocate it. It's something that Ruco's controls, but I will speak with him.
But they're out in the open, and you drive down Menor Avenue, and you could see them, and all the other stores, their dumpsters are behind. If we can do it, I'd like to see those dumpsters relocated behind the building.
That's fine.
outside.
Again, those belong to the tenant. We have a shared dumpster program there for all of our tenants, and ours are in the far back, but I will speak to Bosch Ruco and have him get those relocated out of sight.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Anything else, Commissioners?
Question, Chair.
Go right ahead, Mr. Cicero.
Mrs. Liberatore, have you guys addressed the same companies contracting with each other? Have you created 2 different?
Yes, we are restricted from doing that under the current mortgage loan agreement. We have to keep it under the same entity, but our legal counsel worked with the assistant law director and modified the reciprocal easement agreement. It is still between the same entity, but additional safeguards were added to ensure that the rights granted survive any, ownership severance, whether it be voluntary or forced.
Yes,
okay with
actually, they worked with us in 2 ways. One, the modification of the proposed out parcel split. Administratively, our concern was that each parcel would be able to function independently. And so in response to that, they not only shifted so that this out parcel would have full ingress and egress to Route 20. Obviously, the residual parcel has full ingress and egress to Heisley Road, but they also worked with the administration to get the parking count up sufficiently so that there's sufficient parking as well on that. The other thing that we did to get away from and the references to the merger doctrine, where the dominant and servient estates are under common ownership, there's an old rule of law in Ohio that causes, as a matter of law, the easement to be extinguished. So we were concerned about that. There is, however, there's always an exception to everything. There is an ability for a reviver in that. So I worked with their legal counsel, and I think we came up with some interesting language that I hope never gets tested to create a reviver. The slim problem would ultimately be it's not a problem if there's an arm's length sale of one of these parcels. The law is pretty clear that one, anyone buying it would address the easement issue at that time. So that's not our concern. Our concern would, if there was ever a forced sale, say after foreclosure in a sheriff's auction, that's where you may get into a situation where the subsequent owners may not see eye to eye, or you know, let's face it, if they're trying to maximize the value of their property, they may be utilizing the easements as leverage. So we want to guard against that potential harm. Obviously, having full ingress and egress to a right-of-way for each of the parcels, as well as sufficient parking, is one way of doing that. And then I feel can never feel 100% confident when you get a little creative with language in some of these agreements, but I think the comfort level is sufficient to move forward with this lot split.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the proposed lot split, subject to 3 conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. You're good. Minor subdivision of 1 lot to create 2 lots at 7850 Menor Avenue. Is that applicant here?
My name is Steve Metcalf with Neff and Associates. We are the land surveyors for this project.
Okay.
The owners and director, Matt Jerkowitz, could not make it tonight, so I'll be representing them. Yep, that's okay. There's the videos over here. Okay. The intent is to split the current site, which was occupied by Office Max, which is vacant, and create a new parcel, separate standalone for use by Hobby Lobby. At this point, after reading through some of the comments, there are no engineering plans as of yet drawn up. I spoke to the people at the mall, and they have not yet created those plans. They're working with Hobby Lobby toward that. This deal's been going on for well before last year. So our portion is to create the minor subdivision, which I am going to show here. Sorry about that. If you can, is it possible to zoom in again? I'm sorry. So currently the parcel stands as the entire section of the mall, the larger section being both where parcel A and parcel B is. This was the recent split out for the new building that they put up, and then the restaurant to the north. The portion that we're looking at is right here, which is the Office Max portion, which is directly next to the Atlas Cinemas. I believe we are in code for frontage and also for parking and for minimum lot size. I've been made assured by the mall partners that the new design will fit fully into that parcel. I have sent the plat itself to the county for pre-review, and they've reviewed it for closure. And so far, it meets their standards.
Do we need to be concerned with anything there? I know there was some mention of landscape buffering.
We can review that at the time of the preliminary site plan
Right, but
submittal.
I mean, does the lot split give them sufficient lot size to do the,
Yes.
buffering?
Yeah, I think that it's actually oversized for what they're going to use, so we'll have enough room for buffering
Okay.
to make it to current codes.
Gotcha.
Same with parking as well.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or the administration?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Varga?
it says in the report that this plan allows for approximately 281 parking spaces. I look at the area for parking, is that actually what I'm looking at, 281 parking spaces? Somehow it doesn't look like there's that many parking spaces there. I can't read it. It is, okay. Well, but that would be, are we required to have the islands included now, in terms of very long parking runs?
Which will be reviewed as part of the preliminary
Okay,
plan.
but then do you start losing parking spaces, and are you still in compliance? I guess we'll look at it when we see it, but I mean, that's my only concern, is that will you really end up with enough parking in the plot separate from the rest of it? I know there's a lot of parking across the driveway.
Well, and the applicant also noted in his packet that they would be providing a shared reciprocal easement, which would include shared parking as well.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, we did include the REA, which will gather for the cross-access easements and entrance. And then there were some concerns also in your reply back about utilities. Once they come with full development plans, it will break out utilities to each individual as separate users. I think they'll intend to try to connect within the mall itself first and not disrupt the main road, but we'll see what Aqua and everything else is requiring.
One other question. This will be a completely separate property now?
It will be,
What
correct.
about issues like snow plowing and maintenance and stuff like that?
Well,
This will be handled separately now by a separate?
I assume they would, because it's a separate parcel. That will be a question I'll have to ask the mall itself.
That's all, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sidoti?
this property will be developed under a lease with the mall, or Hobby Lobby's going to own the property?
Hobby Lobby will own the parcel separately, all by themselves, yeah.
Do you know how long Office Max will remain in there? I imagine they're under a lease.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the lot split. Anyone?
Motion to approve a minor subdivision, subject to 2 conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann? Yes. Mr. Varga?
Yes?
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. So in your discussions with the mall and with Hobby Lobby, please be aware that we ask the questions about the buffering and about the parking and that type of thing.
And
So,
snow, yes. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
miscellaneous review to amend the approved development plan of the Village of Marshview Landing. I see they're here. So if you come forward and identify yourself for the clerk, please.
Harley Warren, I am president of the HOA.
My name is Ken Mervo. I'm the secretary treasurer of the HOA. And Mike Caserno, vice president of the HOA.
What we've submitted to the board is the fact that we have been in our positions a little over a year trying to govern the HOA there. And we have some issues that we've looked at and wish to change with regards to the way it was originally set up. The first issue is with a gate. We have coming off of Lakeshore, we have an entrance and an exit gate. We have taken a vote of the homeowners, and the homeowners do not wish to use this gate we would like to go ahead and remove the gate, both gates, the entrance and the exit gate. In addition, those gates would be, let's see, right in here.
It's being removed right here.
Oh, yeah, gates are right here. In addition, at 5483 Becker Avenue, there's a vacant home that is in needs of some major repairs. We would like to tear this house down. It has no purpose for the community. We would tear it down, and this would become green space.
Okay.
Also, off of Lakeshore at 8757 Lakeshore Boulevard, there's a house there that was used as an office when the developer was first developing the community. That is no longer used. It also is in need of extensive repairs. We would like to tear that down, and behind that, there's a parking lot of about 2,500 square feet. We would like to remove that parking lot. Now, on the other side of our entrance, there is another parking lot. We plan to keep that parking lot because that is being used by some homeowners when they take their children up for the bus stop. It's also used by the landscaping people when they come in to do the landscaping.
Okay. Any comments from the administration?
I'd just like to point out, Mr. Chairman, it seems at face value maybe a simplified request, but the staff spent a considerable amount of time researching the history of the two homes at the request of the administration. In summary, for the benefit of those here, as we've noted in the staff report, there was nothing noted particularly at all in the history of the rezoning submittals on the Becker House. As it's located behind Indigo Trail, clearly it's not intended to be part of the development. It hasn't been used, so the administration has no objections to that house coming down. We did a pretty thorough research on the farmhouse. We could not find any records to confirm the actual age of the house. We know it's an old house. We actually, we have our own set of historical records. We've looked online to find what we could on the history of the home. When the developers originally submitted the rezone in 2004, they noted that it was intended to be used as a clubhouse, meeting room, maintenance building. However, you know, the size of the house, it just doesn't suit the needs for the development, the residents, just in terms of the volume of residents that they have to serve as a meeting room or a clubhouse, if you will. So they haven't used it in that capacity. In terms of reviewing its historic value, we really couldn't find any. I think that was noteworthy. We're just, you know, I think the administration in general has been sensitive to, you know, preserving homes that have some historic value in some way. Based on the style of the house, you know, we estimate it could have been built in the 30s, but again, we're not 100% sure. And renovations done to the house, particularly the foundation and the chimney, are not consistent with the Secretary of Interior Rehabilitation standards. Therefore, we do not feel it has any longer any historic value. The city engineer did make a recommendation that if you felt it was appropriate that he would have the chief building official go out and take a look at the home because they've indicated that it's not livable, and then he would also compare and do an inspection of the home if you felt that was necessary to make sure that his findings were consistent with those of the estimates that they've provided. And if in fact that, you know, he agrees that it doesn't have that historic value, nor is that it would cause some substantial renovations, we would not object to the house coming down.
So if the chief building official finds that it could be rehabbed, what purpose would it serve?
I guess I think what we were hoping to hear from the commission, if you felt strongly one way or the other, I mean, again, based on our findings, we didn't feel there was historic, that we're not, we don't have that expertise per se, other than what we found. But if you wanted, and if you were more comfortable with having the, Mr. Decker going out there and taking a look at it, and then coming back with, and if he felt that there were significant findings that merited some rehabilitation to restore it, maintain it, then that should be considered.
So if he did in fact find that to be the case, you guys have no use for the property,
We have no
right?
use for it. It's
So-
too small. It's a two-story house, so you couldn't use it as a clubhouse. We have 184 homes in the community. We could not use it in any way.
You can't even use it for wedding showers or bridal showers or anything like that.
No.
So I'm a little puzzled, what would happen if you did find that it could be rehabbed? What purpose would it serve for these guys?
Well, I think one option, and again, it's just a consideration, would be to sell the home and have somebody renovate it, split it off from the development, and it would be maintained as its own parcel and not included in the development.
Yeah, but it is within the development, right?
It is currently within the development, so it's within their, so that would require them to, again, go through that process of selling it. It's just a consideration.
If I may, we would object to that.
I understand.
Because if it was made a separate parcel, we have no control over what the homeowners would do. And we don't want, quote, an eyesore coming into the development.
I understand.
And to be realistic, it's too close to the road to meet the yard requirements if it was a separate property.
Okay, so we have 3 items for consideration here. We have the gates, we have the Becker House, and we have the I'll call it the clubhouse for lack of another term. So you guys want to get rid of everything.
Correct.
Okay. So that's where we are with this.
I have one question to all three of you. I had the impression, though, you can clarify me, or, correct me if I'm wrong, that this was promoted, at least at the time of sale of some of the properties, that this would be a clubhouse. Yes, is that true or
I've been there
not true?
since 2012, and that was never told to me.
That was never told,
We
yeah.
found out
We-
2 days or 4 days ago that that was the intent of
Yeah,
that house.
yeah, we-
My only concern was that there might still be expectations among,
I've been there
your
since
homeowners that
2007,
there'd be a
and it was
clubhouse.
Never advertised as being a clubhouse.
okay,
No.
that's, I just wanted a clarification about that, that you're telling me that that is not an expectation of your membership.
No.
And they don't expect, and if you tear this down, they expect it to be built someplace else. That's not that
No.
expectation. Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Perkovic.
I would just like to make a comment as well. I, for one, with, speaking of this building in particular, the clubhouse, if you will, I would like the building official to take a look at that. One of the other options that could be made available would be that if, instead of tearing it down, if it does have good bones, if you will, even offering it for sale and/or a move, there's plenty of property around there that it might work for someone to have it moved. Yes, that is an expense, but if you're getting the house for relatively nothing, add that in, it might be a viable house for someone.
Gentlemen, any thoughts
On moving it,
on Mr. Perkovic's idea?
on having what's the,
Well, of
come in?
stalling off the demolition of that house in favor of the building official going out and seeing about rehabbing it with the possibility of selling it with the understanding it would be moved to another site.
That's only if there was a possibility, but it
Right.
would just be nice to explore that option.
Was just the thought of how long would that take, the process? There's one empty lot left on the development, and I don't think the people would want to, in the development, would want, all the trucks and everything up in the front of the development constantly, and we don't know how long
I'm
that
going to ask
process would
I'm going to
take.
ask the administration that question. How long would it take Mr. Decker to evaluate this property?
He can go in there next week.
Okay.
And it's not going to take him long at all. I've already informed him of it, and he was happy to go out and do it.
Okay.
But this is with the expressed purpose of moving the house.
I think that was just an option. I think you were.
I mean,
And then, doesn't there have to be a time limit for these people? I mean, they don't want this to go on for
yes, true.
years.
I think some of the
waiting for
problem is the developer has said he would tear it down, and he wants to, Russ Burson, and he wants to get on with his, business. He wants to separate himself completely from the development.
I spoke to the developer last week, and I've also spoken with Mr. Warren about that. They've indicated they would take down one of the homes, and as last I spoke to Mr. Dawson was that he would take down the Becker house.
He has no agreement with us, Dawson.
Yeah,
Russ Burson took over the development, and that's who turned over the common grounds and everything to us. We don't even deal with Bill Dawson.
Okay.
He owns one lot there that he's building on. That's the last. He doesn't own any of the property there.
Our thoughts as homeowners and looking at the financial aspect of it is, we believe that demolition of the farmhouse would be more expensive than demolition of the Becker house. The developer has indicated he will tear down one of the houses. So our preference is that we tear down the farmhouse
expensive one.
because it's going to cost us as homeowners more money.
Or the sprinklers and the electrical.
So
we have
he's
pipe.
going to he'll demo one of the houses.
Right.
Correct.
And
He
you'd
has
like-
told
And
us.
he's leaving it up to you which house it is?
He
Yes.
had committed
Yes.
to the farmhouse.
Okay.
If we would tear that down.
And is there a time constraint to this offer of his? I mean, that we know of?
At this point, I don't think it's a time constraint.
Right.
We have an issue with the original developer in the fact that he wants to get it done. So that's Mr. Dawson.
You were going to say?
Well, I would just suggest, the planning commission would certainly put a time limit on that inspection and to make sure that it's expedited.
Okay. What do you think is a fair time frame? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, we want to move this process along.
Well, at least in terms of the, getting the inspection done, I think the inspection should be done within the next 30 days. It'll be done before that, but I don't want to commit to Mr. Becker's timeline, but, he's indicated to me he'll do it as soon as possible.
Let's just say he goes out and inspects the house, and he says, yeah, you could move this house. But there needs to be a buyer and someone who's willing to do that, and these guys are on the clock. So, I'm trying to think about what they want too,
You could also-
They'd like the house to go away,
Could also put a time limit on if, I guess coming back to the next meeting, and if it's determined that, there is some historic value to the home worth preserving, you could put a time limit on if that house can't be sold within X amount of time, then the house can come down.
Could we find out from you at our next meeting what your contractor's time constraints are with tearing it down? That's 3 weeks from now. Could you come back and just give us that information?
Well, I know,
I know you'd like it just to go away.
well, Bill Dawson was he was getting ready to tear down the Becker house, and I told him he had to stop. He couldn't do that. So
He's ready to go right
if
now.
I can get the commission to agree not to issue a permit to Bill Dawson to tear down the Becker house,
Oh, I see,
I
yeah.
would not see why you would, being he doesn't own any of the property there. It's our property now, the development's property, so no permit should be issued to anybody to tear anything down
without the homeowners
without the homeowners.
agreeing to it.
It looks like you want to say something.
No, I'm just trying to figure out who owns what, where, when. So it sounds like someone without any authority pulled a demo permit or tried to.
Did they pull
Just to
a
be
permit?
clear, this is all owned by the association, correct? There's
Correct.
nothing, all right, so, and frankly, it's just a funding issue. It sounds like either the original developer or subsequent developer has the funds or the crews themselves available to do the demo. So it's not coming out of your association's pocket.
Well, one
of
will.
them.
One will.
Probably
Okay.
the Becker house, but we've already had a bid up on.
I think what the planning commission is suggesting is, well, maybe you can make a little money off this house, and that's a big if, understand. But, maybe if the developer is willing to deposit with you the funds to cover the demolition of this structure, and maybe ultimately you have to apply that to the demolition of the structure, or maybe you ultimately apply that to the demolition of the Becker house, but maybe there's a buyer for this thing who's willing to move it down Lakeshore Boulevard a little bit, and if they've got a parcel available. I think what they're asking is, do you want to kind of look at all of your options with this, and maybe it doesn't, maybe actually make a little money off of the sale, or, it's a big if, I understand that, but.
So Mr. Dawson's ready to tear down the Becker house, and you indicated earlier that Mr. Burson would take down the farmhouse. That sounds like you got two demos.
Well,
Dawson works,
yeah,
they're in partners,
they're
basically.
they're in partners. In
So
other
that's who Russ Burson used to do his work. He has Bill Dawson, you know,
Gotcha.
he has all the heavy equipment. Burson doesn't have
I
the
thought maybe you
equipment.
could get 2-for-1 deal there for a second.
We've
Not gonna-
tried.
not
Believe
gonna
me, we
happen.
tried. Believe me, we tried.
See, I guess I hear the homeowners association talking that they'd like to remove these gates, remove these two houses.
Correct, that's correct.
I understand if this farmhouse has some historical value, that we need to think through that. So I'm okay with somebody looking at it from a historical value. I don't necessarily want to put the burden on the homeowners to say, well, also look at, you know, if this house can be rehabbed, maybe someone will move it from that location for you. I think that'll take so long to accomplish. So I would support exactly what they're asking and exactly the condition on here, that we send somebody out, evaluate if it's got historical value. Doesn't seem like it does, but we should probably check one more time. Rather than putting a burden that they have to sell it, if it's structurally okay that it can move. That's what the part I'm uncomfortable with.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, so I'll make a motion. It was, I'll tell you. So I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion to approve the demolition of both houses as well as the gate with the two conditions, to have the city building official inspect the condition of the home for its historical value, as well as the building department for the permit review, to submit the permit review.
Is there a second?
Question before there's a second is, what's the, if the building official does go out there and say, well, yes, it has historical value, the commission then, if the motion carries, has still allowed for its demolition, so why even have the CBO go out there if it's coming down one way or the other? I'm not saying what the result should be here, I'm just
Because even if it has historical value, you don't care, you want it down.
You want it?
We have no purpose for
Yeah,
it.
it doesn't,
You don't care.
So,
Okay, then I'll revise my motion and I'll pull that condition. And I'll just make a motion to demolish both homes and the gatehouse with the proper permits, with the condition of the permits,
So,
Without any inspections.
without any inspections. I'm satisfied with the research administration did on the history.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
No.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. The houses come down and the gates go away.
Thank you, thank you.
Can of worms.
Miscellaneous review of a conditional use permit, CrossFit, is that applicant here? You waited patiently, we're ready to go with you.
All right, I'm Scott Panchik,
Kristen Panchik.
Richard Cohen,
the owner of CrossFit Mentality,
the property manager for the owner of the building.
and we're looking to expand our current business into 2,450 square feet for the purposes of adding a bathroom, 2 showers, and a warm-up area for our current clientele.
Is there sufficient parking on site for all of this?
Yes, sir.
Any comments from the administration, Kathy?
No, we were just looking for confirmation from the tenants as to your question, you know, since they use it every day, making sure that they have some land bank parking spaces on site, but if they don't feel it's necessary to develop those at this
So,
time.
if you need to develop those land bank parking spaces, you know you're going to have to.
Yes,
Because
parking.
we want no
hasn't-
parking in the streets, none of that.
No, we haven't had any issues at all. There's plenty of parking.
Take you at your word.
All right.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant or the administration?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Varga.
is there any changes to the exterior of the building at all?
No.
That's all that needs to be done.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sidoti?
where are these 16 land bank parcels located?
It's very,
I don't know.
it's very hard to see. It's on the, are we
Right here.
Are
north?
they in the back?
On the side there, on the right,
That
far
triangular
right side.
piece?
They almost look like they're discolored. Yes, in the triangular
It's
piece.
triangular piece.
Yes.
And they're owned by you, the city? Who owns the land bank parcel?
It's part of the
Development?
property, yes,
Okay, so they can be developed if needed.
yes.
Okay, no more questions, Mr. Chairman. Oh, wait, I do have one more. In your facility, do you guys have an automatic external defibrillator?
We're in the process of ordering one right now.
Okay, we can't require you, but it's a good, smart move, especially the business you're in.
Part of the expansion is purchasing one of those.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my understanding, number 9 will be tabled this evening, is that correct? Entertain a
Yes, it
motion
will.
to table.
Motion to table item number 9 on tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic? Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Okay, last item, a miscellaneous review of second point of access at 8520 East Avenue. Ron, identify yourself for the clerk, please.
My name is Joe Tomsick. I'm the CEO for the Lake County Council on Aging.
And my name's Pete Formica. I'm an engineer with CT Consultants.
And we're here, we have a project that has been a long time in waiting. We received some CDBG funding from the county, and we're having our parking lot finally replaced this spring. And as part of that project, I know this slide here doesn't really show, the parking lot is in really bad shape. We have a couple thousand senior visitors each year that come and visit our offices for things like public benefits, assistance, resources, things like that. We have a wonderful operation with the Council on Aging. One of the things that has been of great concern for our agency and the people that come and visit us is that we only have one entrance on that East Avenue side. What we're here today before each of you is to request permission to add a second apron which would come in off of Station Street. There's been a great deal of discussion, and I'll have Mr. Formica talk about some of that with some of the city folks that we've talked about as this is our wish. What happens, and I can tell you since becoming CEO back in 2012, we have a number of seniors who travel down Station Street looking for the Council on Aging. And when they get to the corner there of East and Station, that kind of triangle area, if they've never been to our office, the kind of like automatic way to go is to continue on Station Street, particularly because there's still an old sidewalk that runs from Station Street to what used to be the former driveway off of Station Street. And so they start to drive and they're looking, and these are seniors, and it's of grave concern for us as they continue, and then they just keep driving and they never do find our entrance off of Station. So then they'll continue, and there's some railroad tracks up forward, and then they need to turn around at some point, come back, continue to look for that entrance, and then eventually they'll figure out that East Avenue must be where the apron is, the entrance, and then they'll usually make their way in, although I can tell you that there have been numerous occasions when a senior will pull over, call us from the road, and I'll send out somebody from our office staff to literally flag them down like this is us. And we have a really nice sign out front there on that corner area. And the building itself has a Council on Aging sign. And so, anyway, Pete?
Yeah, and basically, when we first discussed this project and got approval with the county commissioners about it, we met with Alan Pennington and on site saying, look, this is what we want to do, and his biggest concern was the site distance. And that's why I made this map up here, showing that, look, if we put this drive apron here, from the tracks, you know, we meet the required site distance for stopping site distance and for intersection site distance from, you know, from the railroad tracks. So and then when I sent this over to Kathy here, we kind of got mixed up with timing because we would have simply had a pre-meeting with you, but it was like, hey, we have to have this in so that we can get bids. So it was like, okay, fine, let's go with that. So I apologize for not having that pre-meeting to discuss. I read through your report, and I understand some of the administration had some hesitation about why we wanted to do this. You know, one of the other benefits is the existing dumpster that is here, and it's at a great spot. It's shielded. It's you know, you can't see it from the street and everything else, but that the garbage trucks do have to come in and out, going through.
Yeah,
the parking area. First of all, beating it up, but secondly, with elderly people getting in and out of their cars and whatnot. I know that that's not all day long currently, but it does happen. It would just be a way better access point for garbage and recycling trucks to be coming in and out there. And we wanted to put concrete pads in there to accommodate that, so that it's just getting beat up. The pavement's in pretty bad condition right now.
So this project was denied one other time previously, right? Am I correct? Kathy, am I correct?
Yes. Well, when the project went forward back in '99, that access drive was there, and it was asked by the engineers department to remove that access point.
So it wasn't denied necessarily, but it was asked to be taken away.
And yes, which it was. And
Different purpose.
well, because of not so much the proximity to the railroad tracks as it was the proximity to East Avenue, which is still the case.
Right. Commissioners, questions?
Mr. Chairman, with that in mind, the proximity to the East Avenue, I hear your case for the need for this access off Station Street, but would there be any benefit to sliding it down to the east, or is that a possibility to really accomplish both things? And is that something that works? Because I don't know what our required distances would be to the East Avenue as well, you know, if it's even remotely possible.
I think the issue, that's a great idea. The issue would be, though, the intersection sight distance takes us right to the top, the peak of the tracks as you're going over. And if we do move it any further east, you're going to lose that kind of sight distance.
So you're
for
almost
a senior pulling out of here to be able to have time to react and see a car coming.
So that's kind of locked almost in that spot.
Right, right. I mean, it is almost, it's actually the driveway to the, was that the Matchworks over here?
Yes.
Which has an entrance here also.
Which has a second entrance as well, but it's further away than that.
What if you moved the ingress and egress off of East Avenue, slid that a little to the west? You could relocate, I assume you're gonna reconfigure the whole parking lot, is that correct?
No, we're basically planning on resurfacing the parking lot, leaving the drainage structures that are in place.
So you could move the area of the dumpster, right? So
If we did, where could we put it that would be out of the way
how
as
about
it
if you
is
just,
now?
how about if you just turned it? And then you could take the truck in off of East Avenue. You could deadhead it right into the dumpster. They could swing back around through the parking lot and exit, same location. Just a thought.
That is a good thought.
I tell you, I know what he does now when they pull in, he travels this way and then will come around here and sort of, I forget if it's a front end, but he maneuvers his way, picks up the dumpster and then backs up and goes this way. So the entire lot is being, there's a lot of weight there. And if you saw what it's done over these, years.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Varga.
The thought I had about the dumpster, I didn't realize there was this other issue about finding the entrance, but from a dumpster point of view, if you just relocated it to the extreme southeast corner, right at the end of the entrance drive, closer to the building, you'd probably make the people in the building have to schlep the stuff all the way out to the other end of the...
They would like that, I'm sure.
If you put it there, they could come straight in on it and then back out and go right out. I mean, that's the dumpster thing. I didn't realize there was this whole thing about the convenience of just getting in here
Yeah,
or
in
finding
fact,
the
just
entrance.
this week, and it's kind of both issues. I know that in the staff report, the dumpster issue is listed as a primary.
Yeah.
But just this week, we had a senior who actually parked in this area or so, and today he called to let me know that he traveled this way thinking he was going to leave. And that was something new that I wasn't even aware of, that they're also traveling down here thinking there's an exit off of station or something. But anyway, so what are you going to do?
I'm wondering if your discussions along the people getting in and getting out are okay. Could that be accommodated with directional signage?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was kind of thinking, part of the confusion, this is an East Avenue address. So to the extent, someone finds themselves on Station Street, looking for this address, that's counterintuitive. Kind of wondering if as you haven't indicated, that maybe it's the location of the freestanding sign, for example, it's on the sort of the triangle of the parcel facing, eastbound traffic on Station Street. I'm kind of wondering if that isn't perhaps contributing to some of the motorist confusion, because it's not really telling you necessarily which way to go, and maybe a directional arrow on that freestanding sign, may help alleviate things a little bit. I understand they probably don't want to move that all the way to where their entrance drive on East Avenue is, and they like the visibility there. The revised sign code actually does do that, though. The revised sign code does want these freestanding signs in closer proximity to the access drive, precisely for this reason. So, kind of wondering if the problem can't be somewhat alleviated just with some better signage, frankly. And to the extent people are confused within the parking lot itself, again, it would seem some traffic directional signage, just exit this way, could alleviate any confusion.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm trying not to get so much into your business, but I also try to solve some of these problems so we can move on. If you move the dumpster into the far southeast corner, like we just mentioned, down there, so they would just come straight in, do their business and go straight out, and it's adjacent to the building but out of the way, it would probably work good for the folks. What happens if you did and I want a reaction from the city here, what happens if you put a secondary drive off of East where the dumpster is? That you could maybe get the sign closer to it so that it would show that, well, here's the sign and here's the drive, and it's right within sight of the intersection.
Right.
Now, that still might be there's a drive right across the street from that, too, so it's no further or closer than the driveway across the street from it.
Just to point out, minimizing curb cuts is really, I think, an engineering and traffic safety priority for the city at this point. So
I understand. It just sounded to me like they needed an access point closer to where people were coming from so that you could associate the signage to it. They would have two curb cuts on East. Yes, you're right. That may be the negative of that idea, but I was just trying to respond to this other issue about seeing where you enter the property from, from the intersection, for instance, from East and from State Street and east, if you're there in a car and you don't know where you're going, you could almost see that other entrance with a sign next to it that might help
Part of the
you.
difficulty is the mounding there at that triangle point,
Yeah, I understand.
which is it's kind of hard to see beyond it. So again, I think the point is there may be some self-created problems here, and again, inadvertent. I don't mean to suggest otherwise, but there may be some fairly simple modifications that will better alert drivers, to not to keep going straight, but to actually turn onto East Avenue.
From a signage point of view, what happens if on westbound Station Street, as you approach east, there's a sign that says, turn right for the facility?
Well, we couldn't have that in the right of way. That would be one issue.
Oh, no, you could put it off the right of way, but within, their sign now is, you could put it just off the right of way, but at the point where they might be putting this driveway, you could put some kind of signage that would.
All you'd have to say is
Direct them.
entrance on East Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, we actually sat down with Mr. Tomsic this week, the city engineer and myself. We talked about wayfinding. It seemed as though that was the greater issue here.
Yeah.
One of the options, to your point about the directional, one suggestion we made was to maybe put that arrow or direction on the actual message board itself that's at the corner. And then also consider, because if you look at that top left photo there and the tree, that large tree that's actually I'm looking at the other one, the large tree that's right in front of the entrance on East Avenue, I would suggest putting a second ground-mounted sign. Now, that would require a variance, but I think from at least your standpoint, if you would be willing to grant them the ability to modify some of the landscaping on the site, 'cause that tree is clearly in the view of that access drive. If they had a second ground sign, from a distance standpoint, they meet the code in terms of having a second ground-mounted sign. They just don't have a second access drive, so they would need to go in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance. However, I think they could make a very good case for it because of the position of the current ground sign that literally just faces that corner at Station and East. And then this other sign would serve the primary function of the ground sign, as the law director indicated, to be at the access drive itself. So I think you would actually then solve a lot of the concerns of the site. While I know it's not giving them that second access drive, it does sound like the wayfinding is the greater issue here.
It does, yeah, and I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, does that sound like something you'd be willing to pursue?
But yeah, there's been several really good ideas here. Certainly signage at this point, would help. I don't know if it should go here or right after the driveway.
Why don't we leave that up to your discussion with the administration, with Kathy and her staff?
Yeah.
And we can go from there.
As long as you're comfortable with them making some minor modifications to the landscaping, which is a modification to the development
They're
plan.
going to make a presentation to you, and that could be included in that presentation.
Yeah, I'd want the applicant to understand that when I see a recommendation from the fire department and the administration on the basis of safety, I'm probably not going to vote for what you want. And for that reason, from a safety point of view, so. But I was trying to look for other things.
Right.
Is that a motion to table?
We do like this idea.
Yes. Okay, well, Chairman just suggested, let me make a motion to table this for further discussion with the city, and that you can come back if there's other modifications necessary that we have to review.
Is there a second? Is that a second?
Second.
I can't second my own.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr.
May I ask a
Perkovic?
question? If we do, we certainly want to consider moving,
The dumpster.
if this doesn't work, to put that dumpster pad over here. Would we need to come to planning commission for that, for approval on that?
Well, if you're tabling it, they could consider any plan modifications at that time in terms of landscaping and all of that.
I guess my question though is, even if we need approval of planning commission to move that, correct?
It's a modification of the site plan, so yes.
And it would have to meet the requirements for a dumpster enclosure, you know, which probably it does now, but the new one would too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go right ahead. Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Okay. Kathy, anything under the director's report?
Just to bring up, we did have the other items that we had asked the board to consider, and at the last meeting, the board was going to take a look at the fence and hedges regulations that were presented in draft form, as well as the hotel and bed and breakfast establishments. We were still kind of looking into the hotel and bed and breakfast establishments a little further because of some of the issues raised, and I understand that at least one other planning commission member has some feedback that he would like to provide.
That's true. My comment to Kathy was that I think a hotel motel ought to have a desk clerk to be considered what it is. I know some don't always have that capability, so just a thought.
I don't know how some of these places function, to be honest with you. So I don't know how to react to that.
I think that's a thought.
Oh.
So I would encourage the members of the commission to get with Kathy, make your feelings known on what you think needs to occur with with what was discussed at the last meeting. Well, oh, this was at the last meeting, she brought it up. So,
Well, and if you don't have comments, you can say that too.
well, she would like to hear from everybody.
Yeah.
I entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Sidoti.
Larry, were you able to check into the Longo conversion project of Rich's Lounge and concerning the landscape questions?
They're submitting a parking plan
Yes.
shortly to us to reconfigure the parking lot. The plan, that's always been paved all the way up there. I haven't done the final site inspection on it yet. I did notice that they have it all the way up. I haven't had a chance to pull the actual plans to show that, but if I recall, they did show some type of landscaping there. But until that inspection's called for, and I know, like I said, they're revising the parking lot layout. So we'll make sure whatever comes in, they know they have to put some landscaping up front there.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would remind anybody that has a question or concern relative to what Mr. Sidoti just talked about, and for any project in the city, that they talk to the administration and bring those concerns known to them. We don't necessarily need to do it here. In fact, I prefer not to do it here, but, we can certainly do it by a phone call. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, we're done.